A very good afternoon and thank you for joining us on BTV Global News at 12. I am Ruth Obodo, and now the news in detail. Democratic candidate Sean Harris says his campaign is centered on practical community concerns rather than partisan loyalty as he enters a crowded and volatile contest for Georgia's 14 congressional districts, a seat long dominated by Republicans and currently held by firebrand conservative Marjorie Taylor Greene. The reports.
Harris, a first-time congressional contender running under the banner of the Democratic Party, is positioning himself as a consensus builder capable of attracting independent voters and moderate conservatives in the strongly Republican Northwest Georgia district. He argues that local voters are increasingly concerned about everyday economic pressures, healthcare access, infrastructure, and education rather than national political battles. The Georgia 14th district, located in the northwestern part of Georgia, has become nationally known for its staunchy conservative electorate and overwhelming support for the Republican Party. Analysts say this makes any Democratic challenge structurally difficult, forcing Harris to seek bipartisan appeal if he hopes to become competitive. In campaign remarks, Harris emphasized that he is speaking to all voters, not just Democrats, stressing that representation should focus on solving regional problems such as job opportunities, rural hospital sustainability, veteran services, and cost of living concerns. His outreach strategy includes town hall-style meetings, cross-party community discussions, and targeted engagements with local business groups and civic organizations. Democratic strategists acknowledge that flipping the district remains a steep uphill battle, but they see Harris's centric messaging as an attempt to expand the party's reach in deeply conservative territory. Party organizers say their broader objective is to rebuild grassroots networks, increase voter registration, and narrow historical margins, even if victory remains uncertain. Meanwhile, Republican contenders and conservative activists continue to dominate the political landscape in the district, ensuring that the race is expected to remain highly competitive within the GOP, while Democrats attempt to frame the election as a referendum on local governance and constituent services rather than ideological alignment. Political observers describe the contest as unpredictable, not because of partisan balance, which still heavily favors Republicans, but because of the crowded candidate field, evolving voter turnout patterns, and heightened national attention in the district. Temitope Oluwafemi reporting for BTV News.
U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has described as troubling a report by European elites alleging that Russia was responsible for the death of Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny, reportedly using a toxin linked to poison daft frogs, while stressing that the United States does not dispute the European assessments. The reports.
Speaking to reporters, Rubio said Washington has reviewed the findings shared by European partners and considered the conclusion serious. He noted that although the U.S. is continuing to evaluate intelligence and forensic information, American authorities currently have no basis to challenge the allies' determination regarding the poisoning method and responsibility. European investigators had concluded that Navalny, a prominent opposition figure and longtime critic of the Russian leadership, was killed through exposure to a red toxin. According to the assessment, the substance is associated with compounds derived from poisoned dart frogs and is considered difficult to detect and trace, raising concerns among Western governments about the sophistication of the alleged operations. Rubio emphasized that the United States remains deeply concerned about the circumstances surrounding Navalny's death and reiterated Washington's position that accountability is essential in cases involving political dissidents. He added that the reported use of an exotic toxin, if confirmed, will represent a disturbing escalation in the methods allegedly used against opposition figures. The Secretary of State also said the U.S. would continue consultations with European governments on possible diplomatic responses and further investigative steps. He declined to outline specific measures under consideration, but stressed that the issue remains a priority in ongoing transatlantic security discussions. Navalny had for years been one of the most visible critics of the Russian government, organizing anti-corruption campaign and political protests. His death prompted widespread condemnation from Western capital and renewed call for transparent international investigations into the treatment of opposition figures in Russia. Officials in Moscow have repeatedly denied involvement in actions against Navalny and have rejected previous Western accusations related to poisoning claims. The situation continues to develop as US and European authorities review additional intelligence and coordinate their next step. Evelyn is reporting for Beetv News.
Ukrainian anti-corruption detectives have detained a former energy minister as part of an expanding investigation into high-level corruption and previously triggered a political crisis late last November, officials said. The reports.
The arrest was carried out by investigators from the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine together with prosecutors from the Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office. Authorities allege the former minister is linked to a large-scale scheme involving abuse of office, unlawful enrichment, and suspected manipulation of energy sector contracts. According to investigators, the probe focuses on decisions made while the suspect held a senior government portfolio overseeing energy policy. Detectives believe the alleged activities may have caused substantial financial losses to the state through inflated procurement arrangements and preferential treatment granted to selected companies. Officials said the case formed part of a broader anti-grant campaign launched under President Volodymyr Zelensky, aimed at strengthening transparency and reassuring international partners that Ukraine is tackling corruption at the highest level of government. The campaign intensified after last year's political tension when several senior officials were investigated or dismissed amid public pressure for accountability. Law enforcement authorities confirmed that searches were conducted at multiple locations and that financial documents, electronic devices, and contract record were seized for forensic examination. The detained former minister is expected to appear before a court where prosecutors will request pre-trial restrictions while the investigations continue. Anti-corruption officials emphasized that the inquiry remains ongoing and warned that additional suspects, including former minister staff and business executives, could face questioning on detention as evidence is reviewed. The latest move underscores Kyiv's effort to demonstrate zero tolerance for grants in the strategic energy sector, which had long been viewed as particularly vulnerable to corruption risk. Further official statements are expected once the court determines the suspect legal status and sets the next procedural steps. Evelyn is reporting for Beetv.
Hundreds of thousands of demonstrators gathered in major cities across multiple continents on Monday in coordinated protests against the leadership of Iran, marking one of the largest waves of international opposition rallies in recent years. The reports.
Large crowds assembled in European capitals, North American city centers, and parts of Asia-Pacific, with protesters calling for political reforms, expanded civil liberties, and stronger international pressure on Tehran's ruling authorities. Organizers said the demonstrations were planned weeks in advance through diaspora networks and civil society groups, while local police in several cities reported turnout in the tens of thousands per location. Protesters carried banners condemning alleged human rights violation, restriction on free expression, and the treatment of political detainees. Many participants also voiced support for Iranian women's rights movements and youth activists, chanting slogans demanding democratic change and accountability from the government. In several locations, marches remained largely peaceful, with authorities facilitating designated protest routes and public gathering zones. However, isolated tensions were reported where counter-demonstrators appeared, prompting security forces to briefly intervene to separate opposing groups. No widespread injuries were immediately confirmed, though officials said monitoring would continue into the evening. Political analysts note that the scale and geographic spread of the demonstrations highlights sustained global attention on Iran's domestic policies and governance. Some governments acknowledge the protests, reiterating calls for dialogue, restraint, and respect for fundamental freedoms, while diplomatic responses vary depending on regional alliances and ongoing negotiations involving Tehran. Organizers indicated that additional demonstrations and advocacy campaigns are expected in the coming week, suggesting the protest movement may continue to build internationally as activists seek to maintain pressure through public mobilization and diplomatic engagements. Zainab Mohammed reporting for Beetv News.
U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has launched a two-day diplomatic trip to Eastern Europe aimed at strengthening relations with Slovakia and Hungary, two nations led by conservative governments that maintain warm political ties with U.S. President Donald Trump. The report.
The visit comes at a time when Washington is seeking to reinforce alliance across Europe amid continuing security concerns, economic pressures, and political shifts within the European Union. Officials say the trip will focus on defense cooperation, energy security, trade relations, and broader strategic partnership with governments seen as ideologically aligned with Trump-era policies. Rubio's first stop includes meeting with senior Slovak officials where discussions are expected to center on regional security, NATO coordination, and military readiness along Europe's eastern flank. Diplomatic sources indicate that talks will also address energy diversification efforts designed to reduce dependence on Russian supplies and strengthen transatlantic economic links. In Hungary, Rubio is scheduled to hold bilateral talks with top government leaders to review defense collaboration, migration policy, and investment opportunities. Hungary's leadership has frequently emphasized national sovereignty, stricter immigration control, and conservative social policy positions that have often mirrored Trump's political platform and helped shape closer political rapport with his allies in Washington. Analysts say the trip signals an effort by the State Department to maintain strong channels with conservative-led governments in Central and Eastern Europe while ensuring continued cooperation with NATO structures. The visit is also viewed as part of the broader diplomatic push to prevent political divisions inside Europe from weakening collective responses to security threats. U.S. officials stressed that the tour is intended to reinforce long-standing partnership, expand economic engagement, and demonstrate continued American commitment to regional stability. Rubio is expected to conclude the visit with joint press briefing and policy consultations with both governments. Favor Kolawole reporting for Beetv News.
And now to the entertainment news. Congratulatory messages have continued to pour in for Nollywood actress Tonto Dike following her graduation from a discipleship class at Streams of Joy International led by Jerry Eze. Evelyn Izibili has more.
Sharing a video of herself holding her certificate, the actress expressed gratitude for her spiritual growth, noting that she is no longer the same person who began the journey. She described her work with God as healing, stretching, overwhelming, and beautiful. Dike also revealed that she has officially joined the Church Temple Keepers Department full-time, marking a new chapter in her faith journey. Fans and colleagues have since celebrated her milestone, applauding her commitment and transformation. In another development, Nigerian skit maker and singer Kataife opens up about his distrust of some pastors as he explains why he stopped going to church. In a viral clip, the entertainer suggested that certain religious leaders may build close relationship with members only to later request financial assistance for personal needs. He stated that such concerns are part of why he avoids attending church. His comments have generated mixed reactions on social media, with some users agreeing with his perspective while others criticize the generalization of religious leaders. Taylor Swift has successfully challenged a trademark application for the brand Swift Home filed by home goods company Cathy Home. The company withdrew its bid over the weekend after Swift's team appealed to the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, arguing that the branding could confuse consumers into believing the singer has endorsed the bedding products. Swift legal team filed a notice on 11 February requesting that the application be blocked. They contended that Cathy Home's stylized use of the word Swift closely resembled the singer's trademarked cursive logo and could mislead the public. A spokesperson for Cathy Home said the company decided to withdraw the application because the mark was not essential to its business. The firm's lawyer Ting Gang of Gang & Associates described the move as a practical and commercially sensible decision. She also noted that the company had previously reached a consent to coexist agreement with Swift team over another Swift Home trademark. Evelyn Isibili reporting for Beetv News.
And now to sports. League leaders Ikorodu City secured a crucial away win against Enyimba in Aba to maintain their lead in the Nigeria Premier Football League, while Shooting Stars strengthened their push for a continental place with a commanding 4-2 victory over Warri Wolves. At the Enyimba International Stadium, Ikorodu City demonstrated the resilience that has defined their season. Joseph Arumala's 29th-minute strike proved decisive as the visitors absorbed pressure to secure all 3 points. The victory moves Ikorodu City to 44 points from 26 matches, keeping them at the summit and widening the gap to Rivers United, who dropped to third after being overtaken by Enugu Rangers. Rangers 2-0 win over Wiki Tourists, courtesy of first half goals from Wisdom Ebirin and Godwin Obaje, lifted them to 43 points and intensified the pressure at the top. Rivers on 41 points still hold 5 games in hand following the conclusion of their disappointing CAF Champions League campaign and not adding much pressure to their title ambition. In Abeokuta, Shooting Stars have recovered swiftly from an early setback to produce one of their most complete attacking displays of the season. Wolves struck first through Peter Ita inside 7 minutes, but the response was immediate as Sadiq Ibrahim equalized 4 minutes later to settle any nerves. And that's the end of our global news. Thank you for joining and stay tuned at 3 for our news updates. I am Ruth Ogbodu. Bye for now.